Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Mike, and welcome to session 5 of our Cognos report training. In this session, we're going to talk about more drag and drop and add some SQL programming. So let's get started. Let's go to our sandbox tenant and let's log in with our SSO. Okay, and then click next. And once we log in, we will access our reporting environment over on the left-hand side under observability. So click on reporting, and once you get to reporting, you can click the menu at the top left and then click on new and then click on report. You're going to get to the template page, just click on create and then add a source. This is a data mart that you're going to choose by default. Okay, that lives under packages, and here I'm going to use inventory. All right, just click open, and that connects you to the inventory data mart. Remember what I said about databases and data marts. Data marts were created as a way to allow you to perform drag and drop, whereas a database, you have to use SQL. All right, the data mart contains a lot of built-in functionality. The database does not. You have to create the functionality in MySQL. So here, we're going to continue. I'm going to build that same table using a list object that we showed back in session 4. All right, and I'm going to quickly add the components, which is going to be storage assets. I'm going to click on storage, and I'm going to bring over my storage name, followed by my manufacturer, followed by my family, the model, the microcode version, and serial number. I can highlight all those with the control key and then just drag them over, and it'll line them up as we saw in the previous session. Second, I'm going to add some capacity metrics, and that's going to be in the storage pool container. All right, we're going to add total allocated and total used. We can drag those to the very end, and that basically gets us back to where we were. One last thing, I want to drag pool over. Remember what I said about pool and what is the controlling object here, okay, will always be where the metrics live. Or if the metrics live in storage, then that's the controlling object. If the metrics live in storage pool, then that's going to be the controlling object. Remember what I said in the last session. Very, very important to understand that when you build drag and drop reports. All right, so first off, I'm going to just show the basics. So I'm going to eliminate these right here. The storage pool data I'm going to hold off on. I want to just show you this in steps, which is really good. So here's your drag and drop. You know what that looks like. Okay, and once we run the report, you have the data on the screen. Now, what I want to do is I want to add a little way to manipulate this so you can see it side by side. So I'm going to go to my toolbox, drag a table object over. I'm going to have 2 columns, 1 row, and no maximization. It's just going to be a simple table. It's going to appear right over here on your canvas, and then I'm going to take my list, grab the 3 dots right up here. Most objects are going to have 3 dots. That's what you can select the entire object and then move it anywhere you want. Here I'm going to place it in the first cell. All right. Then I'm going to grab another list object and I'm going to drop it right in here. Okay. It's going to be called query 2. All right, so these are my 2 list objects. One is going to be centered by default. You can actually change that by going to properties and click on top. And then you can do the same thing for this cell. Go over to vertical alignment and click on top. And that'll places both lists, both tables on the screen side by side. Okay. Now the other thing is, so they're not on top of each other, you can add some padding. Padding is like a margin, it's very similar. And I'm going to add 25 pixels in padding and watch what happens. It will push the list object over away from the primary list object, which was my drag and drop. Okay, we'll continue with this process so you learn how to manipulate the Cognos environment as you go. All right, so now I want to build a SQL query. So I'm going to go to report. I'm going to click on queries. This is my drag and drop. So I can rename this to drag and drop storage. Then I'm going to rename this to SQL storage. All right, just so you know the difference. Now, right now they're both Cognos queries. As you can see, there's nothing no data items or filters or anything in my SQL storage query, but I do have objects that I dragged and dropped previously in my other query, which is drag and drop storage. Okay, so to build SQL queries, you have to drag the SQL icon over to the Cognos query, get the parallel bar, and drop it in. It's going to point the arrow back to the Cognos query. This is the SQL object. This is the Cognos object, okay? So anything you put on your screen, your page, your front page of your report will have to have a back-end query object, okay? Here, I'm augmenting it by placing a SQL object so I can build SQL queries and then populate them, or populate the SQL queries as data items inside of the Cognos query. All right, so as simple as that. These are Cognos queries. This is the SQL object. When I double-click the SQL object, I can expand it. All right, it's a blank dialog box. And the first thing you would have to do before you do anything here is connect to a data source. If you do not connect to a data source, this will do nothing but give you errors, right? So we have to go over to properties, change your syntax to pass-through. That is the most performant. You have Cognos native and pass-through. This is my best practice. This performs the best. Okay, so click on pass-through and then click on your data source. Now, these are not data marts. These are databases, right? These are the databases in the data warehouse. Capacity, efficiency, file system, inventory, performance, ports, and then this is a JDBC connector object, okay, for OCI. We don't use that anymore. It used to be with the old product. Okay, so here I'm going to click on inventory and I'm going to connect to the inventory database. Big difference. Remember, database is raw data. The data mart is all pre-programmed data that has been basically created during the ETL process and part of our development program for the data warehouse. Okay, so that data mart is all your pre-programmed objects that you can drag and drop on a report. SQL is a little bit more comprehensive, gives you a lot more flexibility. So that's why we're going to teach you that. So click on inventory, click OK, and there are your connectors. Now I'm going to double click on my SQL object and I can start the process of building a query. Every SQL query in Cognos will begin with a select statement. Okay, and then you'll have different clauses. One will be a from clause, and then there'll be maybe a where clause or even a group clause. Okay, so once our group statement. So once you have those, you're able to basically create the components of your SQL query based on what you're trying to accomplish. All right, so always start with the from clause. The reason why I say that is because that's going to orient you to the tables that you're interested in. And remember, our product comes with documentation, all right, that will show you the SQL, the SQL tables, SQL-based database tables, and the schema associated with the database, especially when you're leveraging the power of SQL. Okay, so looking at reporting, you're going to click on schema tables here under observability, and then you're going to click on schema tables again, and then in here is a list of all the things that you are interested in when you are building queries. Okay, so this I have to refresh. Usually it comes up with here you go. This is what I was looking for. So this is the table of contents, and then the schema tables are actually below, of course, as you just saw. I kind of did that backwards. But here I want to just look at inventory and storage. That's what I'm interested in. So here is inventory storage, and these are the fields that are associated with inventory and storage. Okay, it gives you a pretty good idea of the column name, the type, whether it's nullable or not, and basically the description of what each field in the table does or accomplishes. Okay, so the schema is very important. You can scroll all the way back up to get to the table of contents. Okay, so that's very important to understand where that lives. All right, remember documentation, observability, reporting, and then down the bottom is the schema. Let's get really familiar with this. We really need to understand a lot of the tables in this schema and what they do and how to manipulate them. That's what we're going to learn in this course. I have 30 videos planned, and I'm going to get you to the level of proficiency that you need so you can build and modify your own reports. Okay? So back to the SQL query. So I need a select statement, but I'm going to start with the from clause. The from clause is basically going to use storage. That's the table. And when I come in here using my schema, it's DWH inventory storage. So all I need to do, all I need to supply is storage at this point. Okay, you don't have to use DWH inventory. That's not necessary. We've already specified that over here in properties. And you can use aliases to tag your storage tables and field names. So basically what I use for storage is S. So that shortens the name to S. Okay. And then when I go down here, if I want to group on something, I can create a group, which allows me to manipulate data even further. All right. So right now I want the storage name. Now, how do I know that? Look at your schema, go to storage, and you have all of the things you are required to have to build this out. So you have name, you have model, manufacturer, serial number, microcode, and family. Family's down here, okay? So that's where those come from. So name is the name of the storage. So let's type that in. So it's S as in storage, name as storage name, okay? And then you have S family as, it doesn't have to be in any semblance of order. You can do it any way you want. Manufacturer as manufacturer. Now remember, the sequence, and look what I'm doing here. And I'm doing this on purpose, of course. When you build a column in a select statement, and if it's only one, it doesn't need a comma. Okay? If you're going to add more than one column in a select statement, or more than one field name, it's also referred to as a column, in your list, then you have to separate those individual fields by using a comma. The last one on the list doesn't require anything. Just leave it blank. Okay, so there's no comma on the very last column or field in the select statement. All right, next thing up, I'm going to do model. All right, so I'm going to type this in manually so you can see how it's done. And then in future sessions, I will probably do a lot of cut and pasting and then just go over each line item. That way you don't have to watch me type. All right, it is a pain. So the next thing is microcode version as, I just call it version or firmware, whatever you want. The last one is serial number. All right, as serial, and I can use a pound symbol for number. All right, let's use a pound symbol, and I do not need a comma. You can validate it, and it says validation successful if your syntax is correct and you're using published field names and data tables. Okay, so everything is correct in here so far. So I really don't have to do anything else, but I'm going to click OK, and that basically shows you how the Cognos part of this report gets populated. So here are the things that I created. So I'm going to go back to my report page, and I'm going to drop those objects in this list here. So I go over to my data items icon, click on it, and then highlight everything, hold the shift key, and click on the bottom field, column, and drag them over to the list object. All right. So now they are very similar to what I have here, except family can go here. So I can move those things around. All right, microcode version is there. This, obviously, I used the short name, but that's okay. And serial number. All right, so when I run the report, I'm going to have two separate tables on my report now. Okay, now notice the difference. This is raw data because I just built it from a SQL query, right? This is a data mart. Look at what's going on here. See the order of things here? So it's not the same order, all right? So keep that in mind when you're building these out. We want them to be in the same order. So when you're building SQL query-based objects in your report environment, they have to be sorted manually if you want them sorted. All right. And I usually do that in the query. So I go down here to the SQL storage query. I can go to storage and I can do pre-sort in ascending order. I can do the same thing in drag and drop if I want. I can do pre-sort in ascending order. And then when I click on run up the top in the toolbar, I should get similar results. And we do. Okay, so that's how you keep things in order. That's very easily done. You basically add that functionality to your report, and you can see the capabilities are identical. All right. Now it gets a little bit different. It gets a little more complex. Not terribly complex, but enough to force you to follow some basic rules, right? So if I add my capacity, let's go back to my report, go to the report page, and I want to add my capacity metrics back. They are already here. I just highlight them, right, and drag them over, okay? Now, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add the capacity metrics to my SQL query. Question: where do the capacity metrics reside? They're not in storage. How do I know? Well, if I go back to my schema and I look at storage, where are the capacity metrics? They're not there. You only have raw capacity or raw base metrics. That's it. There's just 3 of them. We're not using those right now. So you have to understand the storage hierarchy that I discussed in previous sessions. Remember, I talked about storage or cluster, node, pool or aggregate, internal volume, block volume, queue trees, and disks. Remember I talked about those? Very important to remember that. Now, the next layer of this hierarchy is node, but we're not using nodes right now, so we have to skip down 1, 2 pools or aggregates, right? So I'm going to go to storage pools. So use your schema, scroll down to storage pool. And here we are. And these are the fields that are associated with storage pool. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind here. When you want to use 2 tables together in a query, they have to be joined together. They have to have a natural mechanism to join. That's called a key sequence. All right, it's primary key and foreign key. A primary key is always either ID or TK. We'll talk about TK probably in the next session. All right, and then the foreign key is basically the table name associated with ID. All right, so if you see storage ID, the first thing that should come to mind is the storage table. Right? You don't see storage pool ID here because you don't need that. You already have it right here. This is basically storage pool ID. It's the primary key, so it's referencing the storage pool. You don't have to call it anything. That's how we join tables together. And the only table I can join here is the storage table, right, that we just placed in this report. So what I would do is navigate back to my queries, go to my SQL query, and then I want to join my storage pool. So the easiest thing to do is type the word join, okay? And that is what they call a full join, all right? So you're doing a full join. So columns on the right must equal columns on the left to be a match. So columns on the right must match the columns on the left to be a successful join. All right, so this one's going to be called storage pool. And how do I know? We'll go back to your schema. There it is right there, storage pool. Okay, and then we're going to give it an alias of SP, and then we're going to join it on the key sequence. So it's on SID equals, ready, SP storage ID. Make sure you spell it right. All right, and that gives you the key sequence. I can do my validation, and it's successful. So that tells me that primary key ID matches the foreign key storage ID. All right, that's your key sequence. That's how you know the tables can communicate with each other. So let's do this. Let's add the capacity metrics from the storage pool. How do I do it? Well, let's look for them. Down the bottom here, I have total allocated capacity and I have total use capacity. I want to grab those 2 metrics. There's others like data, snapshot, and so forth. I don't care about those right now. All I care about is total allocated and total used. All right. So you can come down here, highlight it, do a Control C, copy the name, go back up to your query, type in SP, and then paste it in there. Now look what's going on here. The actual metric defaults to mebibytes, not megabytes, mebibytes. All right, because we're base 2. All right, so every gigabyte, okay, is a basis of 1024 bytes, right? So it's 1024 times the value for gigabytes, right? Or gigabytes. Gigabytes are base 10, right? That's basically divisible by 1,000. All right, so these metrics are divisible by 1024. That's why it's base 2. All right, so keep that in mind. Remember, we talked about this in the previous session and a few sessions back, and we need to really understand what we're presenting here. And it's very critical that we're going to use the same unit measurement when we're dealing with capacity metrics. All right, so I'm going to divide this by 1024, and I'm going to say allocated in gigabytes. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same for used. So it's used capacity again. Until you get used to the actual metrics you're using, just do a copy and paste so that you're not misspelling anything or using improper metric. All right, and do the same thing here as used in gigabytes. Okay, we can validate them, make sure it works and everything is fine. Validation successful. Click OK. Click OK again. Go into the query, go to your source objects, and then drag those two objects over to your data items or Cognos query. Okay, this is the Cognos query. Now go back up to your page, select your insertable objects, click on both allocated and use with the control key, drag it over to the end of the report, get the parallel bar, and then there you go. Now watch this. This is where it gets kind of funny. All right, so I didn't do anything, but wow, this is really a mess. So I'm looking at Antigua here, and Antigua's showing me what, 27 terabytes versus 2.6 terabytes used. Okay, and over here I'm getting 1, 2, 3, 4 storage devices and a whole lot of different values here. Okay, the reason for that is the child parent relationship. The children here are looking for the parent. Where's the parent? Well, it's coming from storage pool, right? Because that's what I used for the metrics table. And if you don't include the storage pool, it's going to automatically think the pool is here because you didn't tell it to aggregate the data. Here, the data is being aggregated automatically for you. Over here, it's not. Yes, you gain a lot more functionality and power with SQL, but it is a little bit more work intensive, right? You have to actually add the aggregation methodology to the SQL query. Here, it's done for you, right? I prefer this method over here because it gives me a lot more power. Drag and drop's fine if you want to just a quick, solve a quick business use case, but SQL is way more powerful and more functional and comprehensive than drag and drop, and we're going to show you why. All right, this definitely makes a difference. So back to our report, we're going to go to our queries and go to our SQL query. And it's a very simple query. It's not, too complex. But to aggregate the data, because we're really not grouping by anything here, we're just kind of throwing this out there raw. So the next thing I want to do is just group by the storage name, or you can use the foreign key ID, or the primary key ID, or even a foreign key if it was a different field, right? So right now, I'm going to use the primary key. I'm going to group by that, or I can use name. Either way. All right. Best practice is to use the keys. You can use names if you don't feel comfortable with the keys. They do work the same. They're a little slower because they're text-based. Keys are numerically based, so they're faster when you run queries. All right, next up. Now I want to do a aggregation method. Now, aggregation methods are like sum, max, min. We have average. So there are several aggregation methodologies that will make the data appear a certain way on your report. Here I'm going to use sum. And I'm going to make sure I sum just the field I'm interested in, not the value I'm dividing by. Do not do that. Always sum the field name, okay, but not the methodology or the unit conversion, we call that. The unit conversion. Do the same thing for use capacity. Make sure you close the parentheses after the field name and it's correct. Okay, so now I've grouped by storage name, I've added my aggregation methods, and now I'm going to run the query. Nothing else you need to do. Just run the report, and sure enough, the values are the same. Okay, now what else is missing? Well, look at these are rounded to 2 decimal places, and I'm not rounding here at all. See that? And that's kind of messy. You can fix that one of two ways. You can do it in the Cognos reporting environment, or you can do it in SQL. All right, so there's a round function. We call it round. Okay, and I'm going to add it after I divide by 1024, my unit conversion. I'm going to add 2 decimal places. Do the same thing for sum. Okay, comma after my unit conversion, 2 decimal places. Very simple. Click OK, and then run the report again, and you should see a proper formatting, and sure enough, there it is. Okay, now my report's looking awfully closer to the drag and drop. It's almost identical. Okay, and the environments are still slightly different, even though you look at this table and it looks like it's a bigger table. No, it's just the way the column width is formatted. The column width over here is a little bit, um, it's different because it's manual. It's a manual process to build these tables, whereas the formatting is built in to the drag and drop environment, right? And again, yeah, drag and drop's okay, but again, we really want to learn the SQL piece, okay? It's very, very important, and you'll see why when we get into business use cases, all right? So that's how you convert your drag and drop environment to a SQL environment. And it's not too difficult. You saw the query's pretty simple. It's going to get a little bit more complex as we get into other use cases, but now you can see that it's doable. It's not too difficult to learn SQL. You just have to understand the schema, where things are located. You read through the schema, take your time, understand each database, each table, and each field, and you'll be able to take advantage of that as time allows. Okay, so spend as much as you can playing around with it. I think you'll enjoy it once you get to the point of proficiency. You can really solve a lot of business problems, and it's a great skill to learn. So that's it for this session. I'm at my time limit. I will see you in the next. We'll talk about some charting for drag and drop and charting for SQL. So they're basically the same type of thing, but with nice graphical visualizations. All right. So see you in the next one.